Hi Year 6, today I'm going to read part 2 of chapter 5 of The Extraordinary Colours of Auden. Late one afternoon I hopped onto the bus into town. I told Mum that I was going for a walk to get some fresh air. After all, the stink of cleaning products in the cottage was getting a bit overwhelming. She smiled and nodded before going back to polishing Uncle Jonah's framed degree certificates on the wall. I got off the bus as near to Trinity College as I could and walked the rest of the way. Perhaps it was just my suspicious mind, but there seemed to be a surprising number of Water Allocation Board men patrolling the city centre that afternoon, armed with their machine guns and equipped with bullet vests and helmets. Every single one of them had ice for eyes. They cast fear across your chest, which made you feel automatically guilty. In a way, I suppose they were all there to protect us, but you couldn't help feeling that you were the one they were watching. Of course, the people that had most to fear were the black marketeers, the men and women who tried to sell on contaminated or corrupted water. Cat's pee, as everyone referred to it. Thirst and dirt and desperation drove many people to extremes, and for a couple of £1,000 they could buy a litre of water. A really stupid thing to do, trust me. It wasn't fit for consumption. I've heard stories of entire families going mad after drinking just a cupful of the stuff. Old and mouldies would curl up and die in their beds just hours after drinking it, and the teeth of toddlers would just drop out as if they'd washed down some terrible radioactive liquid. That's what people said anyway. Cat's pee was definitely best avoided. I kept my head down and hurried past a pair of particularly looking WAB agents. A couple of corners later and I found myself standing outside the entrance to Trinity College once again. I stopped to look up and admire the wide open arch and the turrets on each side. It really did look like it had come from another planet, or at least another time. There was nothing in East London I could compare it to. Suddenly, feeling nervous, I tugged on the collar of my coat and walked in. In the dark alcove, rows of pigeonholes clung to the wall, some of them stuffed with envelopes and packages. Making sure that nobody was around, I reached up and pushed my hand through the slot marked Dr. Jonah Bloom. I swept it across left to right and all the way to the back of the pigeonhole, but there was nothing inside. I stood back a little and looked at the names. Was there a 66? My eyes read the S level, but no, there was no 66. Not that I was expecting one. 66 wasn't exactly your average common or garden surname after all. No, 66 must be a nickname for somebody, or a code name even. I carried on through the second arch and stepped into the large open space surrounded on all four sides of the old crumbling walls of the college. The windows stared down like a ring of ancient professors, closely observing the comings and goings, and the strange doomed fountain thingy was still sitting in what seemed to be quite the wrong place. A couple of students with daft-looking cloaks were lounging on the dull lawn right next to me, so I quickly turned left and headed towards another wide-open arch, my feet scrunching over the gravel. I went inside and made my way up the stone stairs, not knowing where I was going. As the stairs turned and curled back on themselves, I came out onto a corridor. Along the corridor were doors, each of them with a name displayed in ornate carvings. The doors were all heavy and wooden, and even though I put my ear to some of them and tried to quieten my breathing, I couldn't hear a single sound coming from inside. Were there people in there? Were they so clever or obsessed with their work that they were all sitting silently at their desks, scribbling their genius ideas into their little notebooks? Perhaps some of them were even away fighting. After all, I suppose not all professors are old and crumbled looking. Some might be quite young. I pushed on around the corner and up another small flight of stairs. More doors lined the long, chilly corridor. Suddenly the passageway opened to a wide room where a number of flat, comfy-looking armchairs and coffee tables sat in front of the growling fire. As I wandered through the room towards the doorway opposite, I realised that a pair of chairs contained, snuggled into them, two wispy-haired old men reading newspapers. They were so engrossed in the news stories that they appeared to be ignoring each other and hadn't even spotted me coming into the room. I sped up and passed lightly through the next corridor. This place was enormous, and after about 20 minutes of getting myself lost in the maze that was Trinity College, I was about to give up. It was then that I found it. Tucked down a tiny dead end with almost microscopic window looking out over the rooftops was the door I'd been looking for. Dr. Jonah Bloom, Department of Physics. My hand dug about in my jacket pocket, nudging Snowflake 8438 aside. My fingers picked the short, stumpy metal key that I'd found in the attic of Unicorn Cottage. Looking around to make sure nobody was watching, I slipped it into the keyhole and turned it, but it wouldn't budge. I grabbed it with both hands and twisted hard, but still the lock wouldn't turn. Frustrated, I gave the door a kick. The loud thud echoed down the long corridor, and I swore at myself for being so stupid. Desperate, I pulled the large keyring handle with all my strength and tried the key once more. It was hard to move, but click. It unlocked. I smiled. The door was warped. There had been a problem. It curved ever so slightly inwards, and the mechanism had been grinding against part of the lock inside the frame. I looked more closely at the door near the lock. Was that damaged? Chunks of wood were missing, and a couple of small splinters were sticking right out. I brushed them onto the floor before pushing the door open. Inside was a huge wooden desk, and in front of a well-designed fireplace. A shiny leather chair, one of those that you could lie down on if you wanted to, was against the wall under the window, and on the opposite wall were rows of shelves. They were all empty. There was nothing on them, nothing at all, because all the files and books that had once been stored in them were now tossed and crumpled all over the floor. My heart bounced in my chest, and my mind jumped back to the first time Mum and I went into the cottage, and we saw the mess that it was in. I'd been right. This wasn't normal, not even for an untidy, easily distracted Uncle Jonah. Something was definitely wrong. Somebody else had made this mess. Somebody had damaged the door and got into the office and turned it upside down. But why? What were they looking for? I walked into the room and around the desk before sitting myself on the soft swivel chair behind it. So this was where Uncle Jonah spent his days working, his thinking days, sitting in this chair staring out the window across the Trinity Quad. Directly ahead on the walls alongside the door was stuck an enormous poster. It was glossy and was currently catching the light from the window on the side. It was a photograph of some clouds, large, thick, black ones rolling across the sky, with what I assumed to be hints of blue beyond. I spun around in the chair a few times before standing up and turning to the fireplace. Nobody had cleaned it out recently, and it was bulging with ash. Lots of the ash had spilled onto the grate and onto the floor and onto the carpet. The ash was light and thin, and I realized that it had once been paper. Tiny slivers of paper that had managed to avoid the flames and stuck out of the black mass, and I reached for the poker and began prodding into them. I scattered some of the ash left and right until underneath I found almost half a sheet that had escaped being burnt. I knelt down and picked it up. Dusting it off were the words, Project Rainbow. "What are you doing?" I jumped and looked at the door. A tall, broad, dark-haired woman was standing inside the doorway. I said, "What are you doing here?" Suddenly she spotted all the files and books that had been ripped off the shelves and thrown onto the floor. "Why, you little vandal!" Her arms unfolded and she started marching towards me. "Disrespecting the dead when I get hold of you!" I didn't wait around. I quickly jumped onto the desk and down the other side. The woman spun on her heels and watched me as I ran quickly towards the door. "Come back! Don't you just run away!" I threw the door open and stepped into the corridor. "Stop!" shouted the woman. I started running, my feet slapping hard on the stone tiles. Up above me was a window opened, and a woman shouted, "Stop that boy!" I raced across the quad, past the doomed fountain thing, towards the arch. "Stop him!" I could hear her voice coming from somewhere far behind me. To my left, one of the cloaked students on the grass seemed to struggle to his feet, his eyes on me. Realizing he was going to try and catch me, I sprinted even harder and faster, and my eyes were fixed on that archway. Thankfully, the student was slowed down by his flapping cloak, and I bolted through the door with the pigeonholes and out the other side onto the street. Without thinking, I turned right quickly, and then turned right again. Shoppers and passers-by were lurching out of my way, and then slipped left down a tiny alleyway. After a minute, I slowed down, and then, once I was certain that no one was following me, I came to a complete stop. I wiped the sweat from my face and tried to catch my breath. My chest ached, and I felt even more thirsty than usual. I also felt stupid and foolish. It had probably been the noise of me kicking the door that attracted the attention of the woman in the first place. Who knows what else I might have found? I swore to myself again. It was then that I remembered I was holding something. I lifted it up and looked once more. Rainbow Project. Project Rainbow. What could it mean? Along the bank of the river, a large truck was being unloaded, and a second one was being filled with plastic crates. On the side of the trucks it read, Barlow's Industrial Washing Service. It was the day after my little visit to Trinity, and Mum had insisted that we both take a trip to town. I wasn't exactly delighted by the prospect, as I didn't have anyone to recognise me from the previous day. I hoped they wouldn't. We stopped off for a small cake on the way, and Mum treated us both to a wholemeal scone. But later, as she steered me away from the shopping centre towards the backs of the college, I'm sure my heart was pounding louder than usual. What are we doing here, Mum? I asked, my eyes flashing from side to side. You'll see. We can't live off your uncle's money forever, you know. As we neared the pitiful stream that trickled its way past the trees, I could make out row upon row of washing lines strung across the river. In the middle of the stream stood, wearing Wellington boots, a whole crowd of women, many of them old. Each of them was pulling clothing out of the large basket and onto the mud bank beside them, and dipping it and squeezing it and rubbing it. The lines were on pulleys at both ends, so that once something had been pegged, the washing simply gave the line a little gentle tug, and the washing would move along freely to the washers. A very good morning to you. We turned to see a man with a little goatee beard and a walking stick approaching us. Hello. Good morning. Are you looking to have some washing undertaken? He spoke in a strange way. Best service on this stretch of the Cam, we are. No second-rate, overcharged robots here. All washing lovingly done by human hands. Like in the old days. Twice winners of the Cambridgeshire Utility Service Award. Clothes guaranteed clean and intact, or your money back. Cheaper rates, availability today. He looked at us both like a living, breathing advert, deliberately showing off his perfectly white teeth. Not at the moment, thank you. Oh, the teeth disappeared. But Mum was looking out along the way of the busy rows of women in the middle of the river. But I was wondering, I've done some washing in my time. Not on such an industrial scale, I'll admire, but I was wondering if you were taking people on. I looked at her and raised my eyebrows. What was she on about? Taking people on? The man stroked his goatee now, looking at her. I'm always looking for new people. How strong are your arms? Mum put her sack down and rolled up her sleeves, holding them out. Yes, not bad, not bad. Might be good for a few dozen kilos in the mornings. I don't pay much, mind. 20k for a half-day's work. That's as much as I can offer. Well, that's all I need, Mum said, covering her forearms again. When can I start? The man was stunned at how quickly this had all taken place. How about tomorrow? Perfect. What do you think you're playing at, Mum? I asked as we made our way back to the bot job. You can't go washing. You've got no idea about washing. I can manage. Don't worry about me. Anyway, we're going to need a bit more money coming in. We might not be paying any rent now, but Uncle Jonah's cash won't last for long. Besides, she opened the door to the boot of the car. I'm going to need something to do while you're at school. And that is the end of chapter 5. Tune in tomorrow with Mrs. Mordew for chapter 6. Bye-bye.